Let me acknowledge that it is indeed my privilege and pleasure to be delivering the first Prabhakar Rana Memorial Lecture. During my conversations and during the time that I've been here in Nepal, I've heard about how good an entrepreneur, but crucially how ethical an entrepreneur Prabhakar Rana ji was. And I feel very privileged to be speaking, to be the first keynote speaker delivering this lecture, because I myself had the privilege to write India's economic survey for the first time, advocating ethical wealth creation for a prosperous India. So in some sense, the divine willed a synergistic aspect, much like we were witnessing earlier, the sarangi player and his accompaniment, doing a synergistic performance. So very happy to be here delivering this lecture, honoring the memory of a very ethical entrepreneur. My talk is going to be on the importance of ethical wealth creation for Nepal. But let me try and use the vantage point that I have as a board member of the International Monetary Fund. One of the big advantages of being at the International Monetary Fund and being a board member of, member of the executive board is that you get to see the global economy from a very privileged vantage point. And in that context, I'll try and describe to you how I see the global economy and how I see India, an important, and my native country, of course, but an important country in this neighborhood, and Nepal and India, the synergistic relationship between them. Culturally, there's a lot that we share together, and so the importance of wealth creation, ethical wealth creation in creating a prosperous neighborhood here. That's what I will try and speak about. Let me first, I'm sure all of you are seeing dramatic changes that are happening in the global polity, global economy. Some of the erstwhile economic powers may not be the ones that will be wielding as much power in the next couple of decades. This is a period of significant churn that is happening in the globe. And in my opinion, this churn actually started after the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009, after which a lot of the consensus that prevailed on trade and the importance of trade for the global economy, that consensus seems to have disappeared. As a result, the world going forward will have countries that are democracies and democracies that pursue the rule of law, and other countries that are not necessarily democracies. And in this space, the way the global economy will evolve with these two broad pole centers, India plays a very critical role. I think all of you will acknowledge and appreciate that if there is one country, of course, Nepal, shares similar ethical attributes. But if you look at a country that has never, ever been an aggressor to another country, that is India. And having had the privilege of seeing, Indian government and the Indian polity from close quarters, I've actually come to understand that this is a bipartisan, ethically driven, aspect. Similarly, even in its worst economic moment in 1991, when India was facing a foreign exchange crisis with just a few weeks of imports to be able to purchase, given the dollar reserves that it had, even at that time, India did not default on its obligations. There are, I'm sure, during the global financial crisis and after, there are many countries that have actually chosen such a route, but India, again, this was, again, bipartisan, based on ethical considerations. And I think these two, when you put these together, these come from the cultural ethos, which Nepal shares as well. It is this cultural ethos that actually will drive the way India will be, the leader in the, in the global economy and in the global polity. And I think this is best captured by this wonderful quote that comes in the Maha Upanishads. Given that we are in Nepal here, I think I can quote liberally from the Upanishads. The quote goes, "Ayam nijaha paro veti ganana laghu chetasam udara charitanam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam." The essence of that is, I am nijaha, this is me, or this is mine. I am nijaha paro veti, somebody, that is somebody else's. I am nijaha paro veti ganana. Ganana is just calculation. That kind of calculation. Laghu, as you know, is small. Laghu chetasam, chetana. Those that actually have a small mindset, they are the ones that say, this is mine and that is yours. I am nijaha paro veti ganana laghu chetasam udara charitanam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam. Those that have a large heart, udara charitanam, that for them the entire world is a family. And that is the way in which India will be, conducting itself as an economic leader in the community of nations, given the civilizational ethos that actually drives, India's thinking, both on the economic and the geopolitical dimensions. And I think it is important here to understand the importance of economic development, economic growth. In 1991, as I mentioned, India faced the possibly lowest point in its till that time, India had followed a socialist economy. And I think as an economist, I have absolutely no hesitation in sharing with you that the data and the evidence is absolutely clear. There is not one single country that has managed to actually become economically prosperous by following socialism or its twin, communism, as an economic policy. I think that evidence is absolutely clear. And I think there is a very important message that, politicians and policymakers need to take from this, from the evidence that there is. So from then on, 1991, India has actually pursued, a market-driven economy. An economy that I would actually like to believe is one of dharmic capitalism or righteous capitalism. One where, capitalism can sometimes actually, without enough checks and balances, can lead to a situation where only the wealthy end up benefiting. But I think inclusive growth is really critical. And over the last 10 years, especially, India has been able to have really inclusive growth. If you look at some of the evidence that the latest survey of poverty that has come from around 12%, using the World Bank poverty line, from about 12% in 2012, India's poverty now has reduced to less than 1%. And similarly, if you look at the inequality, both in consumption inequality, I'm not talking about wealth inequality, consumption inequality, again, using the latest survey, over the last 10 years, both urban and rural areas, inequality has declined significantly. Of course, if you look at the overall macroeconomic, especially, post-COVID, India has registered 7% plus growth and is now close to a $4 trillion economy from being, about $200 billion, in 1991 to $4 trillion now, and is poised to become the third largest economy. So when you put these data together, you see that, the model of ethical or righteous capitalism, where you respect markets, is one that can deliver inclusive growth and inclusive prosperity. And here, the role of ethical wealth creation, I cannot emphasize that enough. And here, let me share, the importance of understanding, in our own heritage, in our own scriptures. If you read the scriptures, and I've had the privilege, having been born in a very humble family. My father worked with the Indian Railways in the clerical grade. When he was growing up, he actually used to see people, his bosses, who actually he felt were far too enamored by the West. And therefore, when I got into IIT, he knew at that time that I would possibly be part of the elite. Therefore, made sure that I understand, the Indian ethos really very well. Asked me to read the Bhagavad Gita, asked me to read the Tirukkural, a document, written 3,500 years ago in Tamil, so that I was really soaked into the civilizational ethos that, that the subcontinent provides. And if you go and read that, and I think it is just incredibly eye-opening. If you look at the economic prosperity of the world over the last 2,000 years, and the economic survey that I mentioned, which I said resonates with the work of Prabhakar Ranaji, in that the very first chart that we had put was one that showed the contribution to world's GDP by various areas. India accounted for at least 1/3 of world's GDP, at least 1/3 of world's GDP up until 1750 AD. That's 3/4 of known economic history. And we did that by pursuing a model of respecting markets. If you go and read the Arthashastra, Kautilya, a philosopher and a thinker actually who was the economic thinker and strategic thinker of Chandragupta Maurya, he was someone who actually wrote the Arthashastra. Talks about, he exhorts the king, hey king, go and remove obstacles to economic activity. Only then will you have prosperity for your citizens. If you follow, pseudo-European, he didn't say that, I'm saying it, but if you take, ideas like socialism and communism, these are not part of the East. These are ideas that have been actually imported from Europe. And I think it is really important here, let me highlight one small instance. Karl Marx, who's actually, taken as the father of some of these ideas on, communism and socialism. Very few people know that Karl Marx, his bills had to be funded by, his counterpart, Joseph Engels' father, who was a capitalist. In other words, the entire ideology and, even the book, Das Kapital, that was written, it was bankrolled by a capitalist. So the entire idea of communism and socialism would never have seen the light of the day but for capitalism supporting it. And I think this is something that is really important to understand. If you look at the way in which the Indian economy contributed, it did that by pursuing a model of dharmic capitalism. The dharma actually came from, if you think about the 4 purusharthas that are there, that Hindu scriptures advocate, dharma, arth, kama, moksha. Arth is wealth. So it's a combination of these purusharthas. And this is really important for us to understand. If you look at any one of your homes, and actually we do that here, I'm sure, you all do that. If you have an altar at your place, what do you write in that altar? आप क्या लिखते हो उस altar में? आप लिखते हो शुभ लाभ. You write शुभ लाभ, right? Common person, when you actually have an altar where you actually pray to the divine, you write शुभ लाभ. You don't write ashubh labh, nor do you write shubh hani. I think this is part of our ethos. And if you go back, actually read the Rig Veda, the oldest document known to mankind. In the Rig Vedam, there is actually this wonderful shlokam that comes, which is the Sri Suktam. The Sri Suktam is a hymn to the goddess of wealth, goddess Lakshmi, where the prayer is to actually invite the goddess of wealth and thereby wealth into our homes, into our country, and to ask actually Alakshmi, which is poverty, penury, to stay away. So this is an ethos, and you all actually are inheritors of this ethos, where wealth and wealth creation were not thought of as necessary evil, but thought of as actually a boon, to be respected, to be revered, and to be pursued. And that is something that is really important. If India and Nepal and all of us here in the East, if we have to prosper, we have to disband these imported ideas of, that have been imported from Europe and some of those continents. I think it is really critical that we go back and understand the ideas that our ancestors advocated and achieved enormous success, both economic and spiritual success. I think it is really critical. So going forward, when we look at, entrepreneurs like Mr. Rana and others actually. And I think let me mention here, I'm not just talking about wealth creation through any means. It is about wealth creation done through ethical means, which means that you create a product or service that the consumer benefits from, and thereby you create profits as well. You don't profiteer, you create profits. There's a big difference between profiteering and profiting. Profiting is okay, profiteering is not. And I think this is the essence. So rather than get into specifics about what Nepal must be doing, I think it is really critical that you all understand, across the world, it's not just here in Nepal, demagogues will pull wool over our eyes only when we don't understand things well. When we start understanding the fact that wealth creation is really critical for economic prosperity. Let me pose, and this is the last part, let me pose a question. Each one of you today, when you go back home and sit to have your meal, think about that roti or that dal that is basically, where is it coming from? It is coming from the job that you have. And where is that job coming from? Ask that question. That job is coming because some wealth creator, that wealth creator could be a private individual, could be the government, because some wealth creator put in wealth, their risk capital, and that is why you have the job. If your kids go to school, it is because you have a job that is created by a wealth creator. When you get unhealthy, if you can visit a doctor and pay his fees, it is because you have a job that has been created by a wealth creator. If you're able to go abroad, enjoy tourism, again, you actually it's because you have a job that is created by a wealth creator. I think in our part of the world, it is absolutely important that common citizens understand the role of ethical wealth creation in creating inclusive growth, because jobs are the best means for creating inclusive growth. There can't be a better person than me to understand that. If my father did not have his clerical job in the Indian Railways, there is no way I would have been educated, and I won't be here sharing my thoughts with you. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts. I hope that some of these will be listened to and implemented upon. Thank you very much.